Okay folks, we're going to do a teardown of the Toshiba Thrive. As you might be able to see, I cracked my screen here, and so I ordered the replacement parts here that are necessary from National Parts Depot. I have the screen here, which basically is what I'm going to replace, and it also has a microchip there. And then I also had to order 2 pieces of foam that attach to the screen. I'm hoping that's everything I need. I have not yet torn this down, so I'm going to learn this as I go. So let's get started. Okay, so these are the tools and materials that you're going to need. A small eyeglass style Phillips screwdriver, a little pry bar. I just used a flathead screwdriver, and you may not need this. Needle nose pliers may come in handy for you to remove some of the connections. I didn't need them, but that's that. A little scraper to get the tape adhesive off of the outer bevel when you remove the glass. You're also going to need some scissors so that you can cut your tape to size. As far as materials, you're also going to need some canned air so that you can remove dust from the LCD screen as it's removed. A little bit of Goo Gone to remove tape adhesive. And then you're also going to need a double-sided sticky tape. What's on the actual unit is more like a vinyl type of electrical tape style double-sided tape. I couldn't find a direct replacement, so I went with double-sided cloth carpet tape. But I live in a small city and my options are sometimes limited, so if you can find something that's more along the lines of a vinyl electrical tape style double-sided tape, certainly go with that, but it needs to be relatively thin and strong. So that was what I found. So that's what you're going to need to replace a Toshiba Thrive screen. And lastly, you'll need some Q-tips to apply the Goo Gone. At least that makes it a little easier. Okay, so first things first, you need to release the back cover locks on the Thrive, and then where the speakers are, you can remove the back. There we go. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and release the battery. So that's already in the unlock position, and then I'm going to grab a tool here, remove the battery, set it aside. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to remove the CMOS battery. So there's a little bit of adhesive that holds that on, and just disconnect that, and again set it aside. The next step is to remove this black piece of tape. So you remove that, and that then exposes the cabling. So that's where we're at. Okay, so next we're going to remove this side of the camera cable. So there's a little piece of tape here that you can use to get that piece off, and then you're also going to remove this piece. And again, the tape will help you remove that. These are held on by an adhesive, so I do recommend that you release it now because it's going to have to come off a little bit later. And this cable you should not have to remove at all. So that's once you have that done, then you're going to take your eyeglass Phillips screwdriver and you're going to remove the 14 screws that are labeled T5 on the Thrive here. So we'll go ahead and get that done. You want to make sure you don't lose these screws because they cost $5 a piece to replace. Make sure you get all 14 of them. That's an important thing. Okay, once you got that done, go ahead and do a quick visual inspect and make sure you got all the screws. And see, I missed one here. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to proceed. Okay, so at this point the Thrive is actually ready to separate. The front actually disconnects around this outer bevel here, and it will remove from the back of the Thrive here. It's a little tricky the first time that you do it, but basically it's just going to kind of snap apart. What I do is I gently press my fingers against the LCD cradle here, and the Thrive begins to separate. Now you want to be extremely careful in this step because right in here there's a LCD circuit attachment that attached attaches to the glass, and so they're actually connected together via a circuit. So when you're separating this, be extremely careful that you don't remove it too quickly. And then once you have that done, you want to note that orientation. This is a little tricky because these tend to stick on the LCD cradle here. And once you do that, you can separate the Thrive into two pieces. So the next step is to remove the LCD circuit attachment here. So there's a little black clasp that you undo, and then that becomes free. So at this point you've got the back of the Thrive and all your motherboard circuitry, your flash, and basically all these connections, as you can see. There's also this connection, which you shouldn't have to remove to follow these steps, but if you're having trouble, you want to make sure this one in particular gets reattached. So I'm going to go ahead and set the back of the Thrive aside, and now we're going to work with the front of the Thrive. So at this point we can remove the camera cable assembly here, so we're going to go ahead and remove the adhesive. And we've got this cable. This is easy to remember. This is the main board side, and this is the camera side. And the labels will always face up. So we'll go ahead and set that aside. And now the next step to get access to the screen is to remove these LCD cradle screws here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. These are a little bit smaller, so they're than the back of the Thrive screws, so they're easy to remember. It is important to remember the locations of these screws because they have to go back exactly where they are, and you'll notice that there's a couple locations where you can put screws in here, these little screws, but you don't want to do that because the larger screws go into that location. So you just verify that you got all the LCD cradle screws, and then you also have the camera's motherboard here screw that you want to undo at this time. So at this point the LCD cradle and the LCD can be removed from the glass. Now on a stock Thrive you've got some of this Mylar adhesive that is sort of attaching the cradle. You do have to physically remove that. In some cases I broke mine and I didn't see that it had any major consequence. I do recommend putting on gloves at this stage because this guy really tends to stick. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the motherboard assembly. There's a little attachment there, or the camera assembly, excuse me. And then this gently lifts up. Now you want to make sure that when you do this you don't actually touch the front of the LCD screen because that's really bad. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the LCD and set that aside. So at this point your glass is completely exposed. Now when you need to replace your glass, the next step is extremely difficult, and the reason being is that this glass is attached to this outer bevel via very strong double-sided sticky tape. If you're not replacing your glass, I definitely don't recommend proceeding with the next step because very likely you will damage the glass in your Thrive here. So, but basically the concept is that you can remove this glass from this outer bevel. Now, when you're doing it, be very careful not to damage the outer bevel. So if you have to use tools or anything like that, just be careful that it doesn't damage the glass and damage the outer bevel when you're removing the glass from the screen. Okay, just real quick, I want to show you what happened after I removed the glass from my screen. As you can see, I got a lot more damage. There's this double-sided sticky tape that goes all the way around, so obviously when you're removing it, it's very difficult, and this is what I had to do to my glass. You'll also notice that, I didn't have instructions. When I was pulling this out, I actually broke the circuit cable, so, which was fine because I'm going to replace this and my new unit has a replacement, but expect it to be and look that difficult because it really is. So, but I found it best to work. Basically what I did was I cracked an area like right in here, and that gave me enough leverage then to push this up and then just start working the outer bevel along, and you want to make sure very much that you do not damage this piece, because that's a critical piece and I don't know a replacement part number for it. So anyway, that's what you can expect when you remove the glass, so don't do it unless you absolutely need to replace the glass. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and removed my glass from the outer bevel here. I didn't get this all on video because it was a real pain in the butt, but basically that's the idea, is you want these in two separate pieces. At this point you probably have some residue. When I reassembled this the first time, I used a really light adhesive, but basically you want to try to clean up this as much as possible. So just get a little bit of Goo Gone on there and dissolve the adhesive that is on the outer bevel. And then after that, once you get it all off as much as possible, we're going to go ahead and reattach some double-sided mounting tape to this guy, so that it at that point will allow us to remount the glass here. Okay, so once you have your area fairly clean, as you can see, my adhesive did not come off as well as I had hoped, but once you have the areas pretty clean, what you're going to do is you're going to cut strips of your double-sided tape for mounting purposes, and you're going to mount one side of it. And the idea here is that you want to try to replicate what was on the on the Thrive before. So there's two critical areas where you shouldn't cover up. That is here, right in here where the actual LCD circuit attachment goes, and then this larger hole here you don't want to cover up, because that's the ambient light sensor that detects the lighting. So you want to make sure you don't cover that up. But you do cover, and you don't cover that up, but you cover all the other sides here. So, and you can use your old glass as a reference point. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the tape here and show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so at this point, I've applied tape to all the edges, again, taking care not to cover up the LCD circuit area as well as the light sensor area. Probably could have done a better job, but none of this is visible anyway. The key thing is that you don't have any tape that's overlapping the inside of this, because if you do, it's going to affect the way that you view the LCD. So again, just make sure you don't have any overlapping tape, and once you have that, it should be good. Now this is the kind of tape where I can remove an outer bevel when I'm, or the outer lining when I'm ready. So I chose this tape specifically for that, because I wanted to be able to apply it and then remove the adhesive backing. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and remove the adhesive backing from these pieces of tape here. What you want to make sure of is whatever tape that you get is that it has some padding to it, because remember, the LCD actually rests on this. So a little bit of thickness is good, but you want to make sure it's not too thick, like a mounting tape type of thing, and that way you don't raise the glass too far off of the actual bevel here. So okay, now my screen is already out of the case, but at this point you would want to remove it from the protective screen here. So again, you want to make sure your orientation is correct. This circuit board here is going to go through the little hole here, and you want to make sure that the bevel is facing towards you with the tape like this, and that the circuit board attachments there face downward. So what you do is you kind of just thread the LCD through. I'm not wearing gloves, so I'm trying to make sure I don't touch the inside of the screen, so I don't have to clean it again for the 10 millionth time. And so that feeds through, and then once you get it good there, you want to go ahead and rest the glass in place, and go ahead and press down so you get a good attachment all the way around. And that looks like it's off just a tad, so I gotta kind of massage it. And again, you just want to make sure you get a good solid connection all the way around. So at that point, we've reapplied the glass. And we're pretty much ready to proceed with reassembly. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. So now what you want to do is you want to take your camera board here, and you're going to reattach that guy. Oops, you actually want it to right side up. Again, being very careful here not to touch the glass. So that kind of sits in place, and you can go ahead and screw that guy in at this point. Okay, and I'm going to blast this with air and make sure that it has no dust on the inside. And again, I'm going to take my LCD now, being careful not to touch the screen. I'm just going to make sure that's all dust free. We're looking good. And now we're going to remount the LCD. So the camera assembly here is going to fit up towards that. And you'll know that it's in place because it'll snap in there. And once you get everything in place there, you can go ahead and press down on the camera assembly there, and that makes sure your camera has a good connection. And at this point, you can start replacing the small screws that hold the LCD cradle into place. Now if you do screw up where you put the screws here, like if you put it here or here, you'll notice that when you go to put the back on, you won't be able to screw a screw in. So you'll have to disassemble it, remove the screw, and put it where it's supposed to be. So, but at this point we should be ready to start reassembling the Thrive. So we're going to grab our back here, and what we want to make sure of is that we identify where the connection is for the LCD display here. So that's right there. So that's our orientation. Now we're going to take our MB cable here, the camera cable, and we need to attach the camera side at this point because it won't be accessible once we start assembling this all together. So when you're putting these back in, it's a little tricky. You want to make sure that you get a good solid connection and you don't see any pins when you're there. So, so we're going to go ahead and reattach that cable. And now you want to make sure this black clasp is up. And I find it a little bit easier to bring this up a little bit, but I'm going to turn this light on so you can maybe see a little bit better. It's starting to get dark here. And that just kind of goes in. It doesn't go in all the way, but when you put the black clasp down, you'll notice that that line now lines up with the black clasp. So you want to make sure that you've got a good solid connection there. Before you proceed, go ahead and make sure this is a good connection, even though you shouldn't remove it. Okay, so at this point we're ready to bring the Thrive back together. So we just carefully bring the back together like so. And one thing you want to make sure of is that this camera cable doesn't get latched underneath there. But once you have this guy aligned correctly, it'll just kind of snap into place, and you'll hear little snaps. And you just want to press all the way around to make sure that everything snaps back together as it's intended. I try to go through several times just to make sure I get all the snaps. Okay, so that feels good. So now we can go ahead and reconnect our cables here. And you know, again, just like with the camera cable, they're a little tricky to get in, and you just want to make sure you've got a good solid connection there, and you can reapply the tape. And also the camera cable here, it can be a little tricky sometimes, and so you just press the cables in there pretty well. And now at this point we can go ahead and take our battery. I noticed that I did skip the foam step. You have to apply the foam to the glass when you're putting everything back in, and I skipped that step because I'd already done it on mine. This is my 7th or so reassembly. Whoops. Helps if you get that in there the right way. So you apply your main battery, and then you reconnect your CMOS battery here. This one, it only goes in one way, and the little electrical pins face up. So then you kind of reroute that guy in, reapply that. You find your black tape here, and actually you should have done this before you did the battery. I forgot to do that. You would think after this being my 7th time I would have figured it out by now, but apparently not. Okay, so kind of want to make sure that the little crease there aligns correctly, and then you put the battery back in so it pushes that black tape down and kind of keeps that area protected from dust and whatnot. We now take our screws and we get the right screwdriver, and we just go ahead and screw everything back together. Before you actually before you start reapplying this back and putting all these screws in, you should flip it over and just make sure that you don't have any dust or anything on the inside, because it's kind of a pain to disassemble and reassemble these things over and over and over again, like I did as I was learning. So you put all 14 screws back, and again, if you have a screw already in one of these holes here, it means that you put the LCD cradle back on with the incorrect locations for the screws. So you have to then take it apart and put it back together. You can just memorize it or trial by error like I did. And you could do the battery after this. It just depends on the order that you want to do things. I did put together a fairly detailed how to do this guide step by step in writing, where I took a lot more care to make sure I covered all the individual steps. That's up on the thriveforums.org in the facts section. Okay, so now once we have all the screws in place, now we can safely take the back and reapply it. Go ahead and close this guy up, and once you do that, you've got a brand new Toshiba Thrive screen, and it should be evenly matched all the way around. On the outside, you want to make sure that I've got some fingerprints on the outside that I need to clean up, but that's easy enough, and I do that all the time. So that is how you tear down and rebuild a Toshiba Thrive. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial.